but in the past, the church was the focal point for people in the South Okanagan, our people. And church holidays and everything else were a time of great gatherings here from all over the South Okanagan.
It's trying to be really careful about what you say these days, but I really think it's justice. And is it justice? I think there's a reason why they did it, because they're angry. The government isn't acknowledging, they're not acknowledging that it's a genocide, so, I believe they had a reason for doing it, and I support them.
I love that church. I loved it. And I don't like seeing it all pile of crap. I hope they rebuild or do something.
In recent days, British Columbia has seen 5 Catholic churches burnt, and barely a word from our politicians, including our country's leader, Justin Trudeau, who calls himself a Catholic. But it's no surprise, is it? Anything that deflects the attention from the federal government's involvement in residential schools, including his father's, is a win for him. But is it a win for Canada? Or for the Canadians who acknowledge our dark history with residential schools and want to move forward together so that we are stronger, united? Last Wednesday, my colleague Matt Brevner and I traveled all the way to the Okanagan Valley. And no, we didn't go to enjoy the plentiful beaches and the tasteful wineries or the delicious fresh produce in the area. Instead, we went to investigate what had happened to 2 Catholic churches that once stood intact on First Nation reserve land. That is, until June 21st, when both ended up being burnt in suspicious fires, just weeks after the first of multiple announcements that unmarked grave sites had been located near residential schools. We also wanted to know how seriously the RCMP would be investigating these fires. And what does the community there think about the churches that were burnt, and what do they believe actually took place? We also wanted to better understand why on earth there seems to be so little concern or condemnation about 2 suspected arsons that ended up in the burning of places of worship, and not just from politicians or organizations that generally say that they stand against hate in Canada, but also from Christian leaders themselves. But could you believe that before we could even bring you this in-depth report, not 1, not 2, but 3 more Catholic churches in BC have caught ablaze, with one of those fires clearly being set intentionally. 5 churches have had flames on them in just over a week. We are not only just a country with leaders that turn their back against Christian pastors who get imprisoned simply for offering in-person worship when their public health officers say no. No, now we have leaders who are silent after watching 5 churches, places of worship, be set afire. We're going to bring you the facts that are available to us. We're going to ask the tough questions like we always do on Rebel News. And if you appreciate the work that we do here, please help support these boots on the grounds trips. As I mentioned, 2 of us went all the way over to these areas. We spent time with the people in the community. We had to have accommodations, eat when we got a chance to, and we can't do any of those types of things without your support. And how you can support us, if you want to hear the other side of the story, always, is by donating what you can at rebelfieldreports.com. I'm not done looking into what's happening with these churches and our country's shameless lack of response to them. And I'm also not done bringing you fact-based reports about the unmarked grave sites that are being located across Canada. You can check out my first one at rebelnews.com. But for now, take a look at what we found out about the first 2 churches to go up in flames. When we first arrived on the site of the first of now 5 Catholic churches that have recently been in flames in just over a week, we were really surprised about how nestled it was within the neighborhood there. Clearly, if this is arson, the criminals involved, their hate for the Catholic Church far outweighs the safety of the Indigenous families that live around it. It's in the heart of the community here on the reserve, and as you can see, there's little to anything left. What was this church to the people who lived in this area? Was it operated by horrendous people that were kidnapping children and forcing them to become Catholic? Or was it offering a service to the people that lived here? To the right of me is a playground. I'm told that this church was in complete operation before life with COVID-19. I imagine children were playing there. If you look to the left of me, there's actually a health building that was in fact still operating during the time of the fire, which can't at the moment, if you look, it's melted from the fire here. And I'm also going to ask the people in the community here if they think this has absolutely anything to do with the recent press release from the Tecumseh Shishwemit First Nation that stated there had been a discovery of 215 remains of children who went to the Kamloops Indian residential school there. Now, if you haven't already seen my report, my very fact-based report that doesn't get ahead of the facts, you can do so at rebelnews.com to learn more about what happened there, and I am following this story closely. The RCMP called the fires that took place on June 21st, National Indigenous Awareness Day, suspicious. I reached out to him the day after the press release to see if there had been an update on the investigation. He responded saying that our investigators have obtained CCTV video that shows a dark-colored truck attend the Sacred Heart Church and depart just prior to the fire starting. Unfortunately, the quality of the video does not allow them at this time to identify the make or model, but they have sent it off to a video forensics to see if they can get more enhanced details. Now, flash forward to when I found out the disturbing news that 2 more Catholic churches had been burnt. I decided to reach out to Sergeant Beta again. I wanted to know if anything had changed. Are they still calling these fires suspicious, or are they now investigating a probable hate crime? Sergeant Beta didn't directly answer my question, but he did refer me to a recent press release about the 3rd and 4th Catholic Church to go up in flames on First Nation reserves. The statement says that RCMP are still treating both of these fires as suspicious and are looking to determine any possible connection to the church fires in both Penticton and Oliver that happened on June 21st. Suspicious? Is that what we're calling 5 Catholic churches being burnt in just over a week in one province these days? The mainstream media isn't linking this to hate like they do with, pro-freedom protesters. There's no statement being made in the House of Commons. Most politicians aren't even tweeting on it, for Pete's sakes. They can't even put 5 seconds together to put a sentence out there to, maybe condemn this from happening in the future. I reached out to one of the local MPs. His name is Richard Canning, to see if he'd like to give a statement about what's happening in his region. Nothing. No response. Not at all. Now, just imagine for just 1 second, and of course I would never want this to happen, but bear with me. Imagine for a moment that it was 5 mosques or 5 temples that this had happened to in a week, or not even 5, just 1, or not even being burnt, but vandalized. What would be taking place in our country right now from our leaders, from the citizens, from everybody? It would be complete outrage. Our media would be posting it everywhere, but not when it comes to the Christians. No, the Christians, they're getting what they deserve. This is justice, right? This is disgusting and vile. And anyone who stands for burning churches, no matter the excuse, you stand on the wrong side of the history. We're trying to move forward together. But thankfully, not everybody was against these churches, including people who live in the community and First Nations who had many positive memories there. I'm sorry to interrupt this report, but this is urgent. Since filming this report for you guys, we now know that another church, this time in Alberta, caught aflames, and also in Vancouver, a Catholic church was vandalized, and something they were developing also caught a fire. This is serious, people. And even if politicians and anti-hate groups are not going to treat it as such, we will at Rebel News. That's why we are prepared to offer any tipster $10,000 if they give us a tip at findthearsonist.com that leads to the arrest of what is likely to be arsons that are targeting Christians and burning their places of worship. Again, that is findthearsonist.com.
Because my mom got me, I love that church. I loved it. And I don't like seeing it all pile of crap. I hope they rebuild or do something. Man, everyone got married and buried in that church. Everybody. Right from my grandpas to my uncles and aunts. It was a good place for me.
My thoughts is that it has to do with the Kamloops residential school children that were murdered. So, and I made a comment about that on Twitter. And so that's what I feel has happened here, is my guess.
Did you hear that the children were murdered there, or?
Well, I believe they were murdered, of course. I mean, I have my sister-in-law was in a residential school, so, and she told me all about it, what happened, and I was actually surprised because I thought, did they still have the schools in the 70s? And she said, yeah, and so I really think this is what this is about. And you know what?
To me, it's like we can't tell people that it's wrong to go to church and to pray and stuff like that, because our people here did that. Like they found, a lot of them found, like, I guess, happiness, comfort, whatever, and going to church. My mom's family from across the line, they all went to church. Every year, my Uncle Mike used to come up and tell me, Francois, we're going. And I said, where are we going? He said, you know where we're going. We're going to church on Christmas.
In short, it wasn't serving the community. I can tell you there were 4 of us that were from this reserve here that were attending on a more or less regular basis, hit and miss for us. But that was that 4 people. The rest were from the city of Penticton who came in. So really, I guess in all fairness, to say it wasn't running effectively. But in the past, the church was the focal point for people in the South Okanagan, our people. And church holidays and everything else were a time of great gatherings here from all over the South Okanagan.
There's probably a lot of people in the community that have been serviced by the church, and I don't think burning down churches is going to right any wrong or solve anything. It's a clear case of vandalism, in my opinion, and what occurred in the past, obviously there was things that occurred in the past that were not good for the natives, but burning down churches is not going to solve anything. So, I mean, if we're going to let people start burning down buildings, where's it going to end?
I am the pastor here, the pastor that serves or ministers at Sacred Heart Parish until now. We minister to the people there, Father Ben and myself. Father Ben comes from a nearby city, to Penticton, and so, but myself, I'm the one responsible for that church. We were always welcomed. We have a good relationship with the people who come for services there for Mass. They're wonderful, wonderful people of faith and prayer, and just good human beings. And we really connected very well, and we'll continue to connect, because that which brings us together is so beautiful and so strong. Not even fire can take it away.
Do you think that this had anything to do with, some of the discoveries that are happening?
Guaranteed.
So do you think it's okay, like that the...
It's trying to be really careful about what you say these days, but I really think it's justice. Is it justice? I think there's a reason why they did it, because they're angry. The government isn't acknowledging. They're not acknowledging that it's a genocide. So, I believe they had a reason for doing it, and I support them.
But this isn't a government building. I mean, not that that would be okay, but this is a church that's been in the community on the reserve for a long time.
As I say, my sister-in-law is Indigenous. I actually worked for a police service, and we were trained, I can't remember the name of the camp that we went to, but we learned all about their traditions and their thinking about what has happened. And it was around the time, I believe, when Harper supposedly made an apology. But I mean, and then Truth and Reconciliation came through, and has there really been anything done? Has there?
To burn a church down like this because of what they had found up in Kamloops Residential School. And it's two different entities altogether, but from the same. It's two different, but it's from the same place. Roman Catholic religion.
We had just previously had a meeting with the bishop regarding reopening the church because of the pandemic. The church was shut down, and then they said, well, we want to reopen next Sunday. One of our parishioners said she didn't feel comfortable of reopening it because of that was just after the finding of the 215 bodies. So we agreed, and we had a meeting with the bishop, and he agreed also. So we were not going to reopen the church, and the following Monday or whatever it was, it burned down. I guess that was where we were at. So.
We don't know people's motives, and so I would simply wait, for the RCNP to finish the investigation, and then so that we can roll with the facts, and so that's where I stand at this time.
I may be an alcoholic, but I am religious. I believe in the man.
Yeah.
And the Holy Ghost. All three of them guys.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to sign off there. Sorry for the tears.
No worries.
So, but from the first church they built here was back in the 1800s, the late 1800s. And that church is right over there. Like, it's where we took it from where it was first built and brought it here and just set it up here. And then they built this one 111 years ago. When they put that first church here, it was their symbolism of their power over our people. They said that you had to go to church and pray to be a good Christian or be a good Indian, or that's what I was hearing, all when I was growing up. Until I was 8 years old when they took me and my brother to residential school. And then I found out what the Roman Catholic religion was all about. And to me then it was hatred. They hated us.
Now, you mentioned your grandfather converted to Catholicism. Was that by choice, or?
Yes, it's a mystery because, there was no contact here. We were living as we always did. And then this missionary, Father Pandozzi, came in, all alone. And seemingly overnight, all of our people, my grandfather and his whole tribe, converted to Catholicism. I often asked my mother, how did this happen? And she couldn't answer. It's just, they just saw something in the man, I guess, something in his teachings, which parallel theirs, they thought they should go with us. So there was no coercion or anything like that.
What they did to us in that school, like I was 8 years old, and all I knew was the love of my grandma and my grandpa and my mom, my dad, my sisters and brothers, and uncles and aunties. And then to be taken away and put into a big building, and then follow the rules that I didn't know. I didn't know nothing about. I didn't know rules. So, but that's all. See, that and the church was what I hated. I hated this church because of what they did, what they represented and what they did.
Well, I certainly don't deny, and I'm equally insulted by the way that church officials dealt with our people in schools and on some reserves. Even here, there were some that priests that ran like little dictators, and the same happened in various residential schools. Kids were very badly mistreated. There was that directive to take the Indian out of the child, and and that was adhered to. I mean, they weren't. The kids weren't allowed to speak to one another. The sisters or brothers and sisters weren't allowed to see one another. So there was all of that, horrible mistreatment.
Some of the, between all what's going on now, it's the children or the grandchildren of the parents that were in the school, like my children and grandchildren. I told them just a couple of years ago about what happened to me. I brought it to a family meeting and I told them, and I said, don't blame those church building like that. It's the religion. It's the religion that had a hold on our people since 1875.
Do you think that the burning of this church and the other one fairly close by has anything to do with the recent discovery on residential school land?
I think it certainly has some connection to it. It's created a lot of intense feelings on part of some people on the reserve, because of the findings of those bodies of those little children. I think it's created a lot of anger towards the church, rightly or wrongly. And I guess I should backtrack and say, I think part of the problem here is that a lot of the young people don't understand the historical significance that the church has, that their grandparents or great-grandparents all went to that church. They went there, they had festivities, they had good times. The church was instrumental in organizing the community into more, for instance, we had a police force here in the early days. That was through the church's efforts. There's a lot of positive things that happened, but also because the church really, in my opinion, is made up of men, individuals. Some are good, some are bad, and I knew some that were very bad and very dictatorial, and so those things, treatment that some of the members may have received at the hands of those people certainly lead to feelings of ill will towards the church in general.
To me, I think it was agitators that did this, because from white to Indians, they used that to stir up, like most people don't understand what had happened. If you did not go there, if you were never in a residential school, then you shouldn't talk about it. You shouldn't say, oh, this is what happened, or you say, oh, I heard this, I heard that.
Yeah.
What if you heard this, but you made up this? If you weren't there, then you should not speak about it. I'll talk about it, but to a certain point. you know.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that it was the worst part of my life that I would never wish it on your children, his children, or anybody else's children to go through what I went through from 8 years old to 13.
I was a militant in 1975, and I led armed resistance against the federal government. We did not think that we should come and do any form of action on the reserve, because it only affected our people. Our people weren't the enemy. The enemy was out there in the federal government. I think that the same with this thing, that people are misguided, they're misdirected, they're misinformed, and of course it's after the fact, but they act on something that, as I mentioned earlier, that their ancestors went to, belonged to, had faith in. So really they're directing their anger towards us, to themselves.
I'm saying that this is, not right or wrong, but they went about it. If you tell them, well, they should have just went and tore it down or took it apart, well, then that's like being a hypocrite, like our people here that went to church, they were still going to church before it burned down. It wasn't many of them going, but they had to go. I mean, that was their thing to do. They went to church, and nobody, would say, oh, nobody got mad at them for that. That's the way they released their whatever their problems they had or whatever.
Behind me is what's left of St. Gregory's Church. The church is attached to a small grave site on the Asoyos Indian Band. It's the second church to be left in shambles. From the looks of what's inside the church and the rubble, it doesn't appear like this church was being actually used, other than, like I said, being attached to this small grave site. But what's different about this location is just how in the middle of nowhere it is. And not just the middle of nowhere, the middle of a desert. I don't know if you guys know this, but BC has had issue after issue with fires. If this is proven to be arsons, what type of sick individual or individuals set fire to a place like this where no one's going to catch it? It's a miracle it was caught. How many lives could have been ruined because of that action? Now, according to the statement from Oliver RCMP, they were made aware of this fire here almost 2 hours at 3:10 a.m., 2 hours after the other fire. So you tell me, what do you think is going on here? Is this just a coincidence that 2 Catholic churches were set ablaze? Or is this something more insidious, something Canada needs to take seriously and stand against? Even though Justin Trudeau doesn't care about pastors rotting in jail for practicing their religion or Christian places of worship going up in flames in his own country, we at Rebel News will be reporting on these and giving you the other side of the story, and we need your help to do it the right way. Please donate what you can at rebelfieldreports.com. Drea Humphrey for Rebel News. If you have any information about why these churches are burning down, head to findthearsonist.com. We at Rebel News are prepared to offer $10,000 to whoever gives a tip that leads to the arrest of the likely arsonists involved in destroying these churches.